The creators of this podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which it is recorded. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first storytellers of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Indigenous people who may be listening today.
This podcast is a TOFOP production.
Head to tofop.com for more.
The following episode of TOFOP is rated MA for mature audiences. It may contain sexual references, time travel references, allegations of bin misconduct, and mild coarse language. TOFOP advises that this episode is not suitable for anyone under the age of 15 or anyone who thinks a comedy conversation between two old mates sounds like a terrible idea for a show. Minors must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. This is John Deek speaking.
Everyone relax. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching. And it has just got, I'm recording outside as I tend to normally do, and it has just got very fucking windy here all of a sudden as we were about to start this recording. So
it did sound like you're a BBC correspondent reporting from some kind of like natural disaster.
Outside where the earth has opened up.
Would not surprise, would it? Like after the last couple of years we've had, if it turned out that like a massive portal to hell had opened, would anyone like, how long do you think it'd stay on the front page for?
We've mentioned in previous episodes that we are banking a bunch of episodes at the moment because you're going overseas and my new series for Question Everything is on television. People can check that out on ABC TV or ABC iView. And the way the world has been in the last couple of years, that does very much set us up for us missing a major disaster. Like chances are something like if we'd done this last week, we would have missed the Queen. Like we would have just had an entire period where like there was no acknowledgement. The Queen would be, for all intents and purposes, if you only get your information from the TOFOP podcast, still alive. God save the Queen. Yeah. Long live the Queen, you would think, as you listen to the TOFOP podcast. So occasionally we probably should just start like random episodes with, how about that thing? How about fuck, man?
Awful. Just awful.
Just can you believe it? After everything we've been through.
We thought it wouldn't happen again. I mean, do we dare make any predictions about what could happen in the next 5 weeks that we're
what could happen? So let's make some predictions.
All right, how about a celebrity death? I'll make it easy.
Yeah, all right. Good.
Which celebrity do you think will be the next to die?
Yeah, very good.
And you can't be like a safe one. It can't be like, Betty White. Is she still alive?
I think she might have died. So that would be particularly safe. Lock in Betty White. I think she's gone.
All right, give me one celebrity that has died.
Okay, so look, the truth of it is that, as we've learned from a whole bunch of celebrities dying in their early sort of 50s, like you don't have to go to, like someone who's in their 80s or their 90s. Like someone who's like, who would it be from the current world of entertainment that Kanye West.
Kanye, yeah. That's a good one. I was going to say it has to be a shocking one.
Yeah, it has to be someone like big enough that the entire world would be like, with the stakes that have been raised in the last couple of years, which constitutes like a worldwide global like celebrity death. It would have to be someone as big as Kanye, I reckon. And Kanye, I mean, the age that we're in, where it's all about conspiracies and mythology, and like the hip hop world already has like a lot of mythology around the death of rappers and the stories behind them and the conspiracies behind them. The idea that Kanye dies in some sort of mysterious circumstance where there's room for speculation feels very 2022 to me.
Yeah, but it'll also turn out that he recorded an album in anticipation of this event. Like it's his magnum opus. It's like the last thing that he released was this, and every song will be about, I told you all I was going to die. Yeah. I told you all this is going to happen.
To be played at his funeral in like a Donda-style listening party. So it's like a 3-day, like he's recorded 3 days of funeral music for people come and play there. Like there'll be like $300 black T-shirts, Kanye black T-shirts on sale for people at the event.
A friend of mine is now moving in A-list circles. She's now deeply involved in A-list circles.
Right.
And I heard the other day that she attended the Ben Affleck J-Lo wedding, which, like would be right up there when it comes to kind of like, you'd think A-list kind of events. Is it possible? Is there a universe in which, what were they called? Ben Low? No, what were they called? J Ben. What was their, they were Baffleck. No, what were they? They were
not
Ben Low,
Baffleck.
J Lo. This is why I should know this. Ben Affleck and J Lo becomes Benefer.
Yeah.
Benefer, of course, it was right in front of me. And then J Lo threw me. Like, how do you get to like from Ben to J Lo? The Benefer.
Belo. Flo.
Is it possible they had a low-key wedding? Do you think, like, is it possible when you're that famous, when, they're probably friends with not other just the celebrities, but, I'd say like world leaders, like I imagine Amal Clooney's probably invited some of her UN kind of bigwigs. Like, so can you just say, hey guys, there's $500 in the bar. We're just, we're just doing like a quick ceremony and then we're going to the pub. Can you do that when that's the like you'll hire the whole pub out yourself because obviously, but can you do a low key wedding when you're that?
You can't have those UN committee members mingling with the general public.
People who literally represent us,
the riffraff.
But you know what I mean? Like, can you be that famous and have a low key wedding?
Yeah, but you have to go totally low key. Like that's got to be the angle, right? Like, the idea is like, look at this. They're the most glamorous couple in the world. They could have like a, Saudi oil baron style wedding if they really wanted to. They've both got money to burn and they know every celebrity in the world. They could absolutely pimp this out. But instead, they've chosen, didn't they get married in Vegas?
I don't know anything about it.
I think they got married in Vegas first. Like they might have like done the whole drive-through wedding. So I think they did some version of that and then like had a party maybe, I would say is what they actually did. So yes, but go the whole hog, like old school, like, disposable cameras on the table and stuff. Like, just lean into the idea that we're going to have a wedding like two ordinary people who are having their wedding. We want our friends to take photos of the night and leave them in the old school media, not on their phones, none of this sort of stuff, like no social media. This is just cameras on the table, the UN table, what a party. Like, I mean, those guys absolutely go
I
off
would love it if
like
they had their quickie wedding in Vegas, but they had a party, like their reception, they just hired a scout hall. They just hired a scout hall somewhere.
Right.
And just got some slabs.
Close to white
wine. Yeah, it would be amazing. It'd be so good. But if you were a guest, like let's say you were my friend.
Two choices. Like I would love that if like Matt Damon's sitting next to Kofi Annan and they're just like, all right, chicken or beef. Yeah. One of you's got to have each. So you've got to work it out between the two of you. Kofi's like, let me take this negotiation. I'll have him in a minute.
Yeah. Hans Blitz is it like checking the kitchen saying, are you sure there's no more? You're not hiding any beef in there somewhere? Some beef of mass gustation.
Degustation. He's looking for morsels of mass degustation.
But if you were invited to that wedding, right, like just say you'd be expecting like, there's probably going to be like a tote bag, like I'll get like a gift or something like that. And then you turn up and they're like, guys, we just want to keep this low key. It's just beer, wine, spirits behind the bar, like have fun. Are you like, oh, cool? They're just
we'd really like to go on an overseas holiday for our honeymoon. So if you could all just like drop some cash in the bucket, that'd be appreciated.
But are you looking at that and then going, oh, they're just like us. They're down to earth. I dig it. Or are you like, fucking goddamn it, I wanted the whole kit. I wanted like glitz and glam, and I wanted to get a gift bag.
No, I think that's fun, and I think that's fun and funny.
Yeah.
If you are that sort of person, but. Do they do the traditional wedding in regard to like, is there speeches from the mum and dad? Is there like best man speeches? Like,
does Matt Damon do the best man speech? You think he has to, right?
I mean, if he doesn't, people start to talk, right?
I guess there's no Good Will Hunting 2 coming out anytime soon.
But then again, like if you're Matt Damon and you're doing a speech at Ben Affleck's wedding, can it be like loose or does it have to be like good, right?
No, it can be loose. I imagine though, if Ben Affleck, because Ben Affleck probably has other friends, he probably, has a closer friend.
Casey.
Yeah.
Does Casey, his brother.
Right. So,
maybe he's.
but I'd love Casey to be the best man and a disgruntled Matt to be sitting there getting progressively more drunk and finally storms onto stage and says,
bullshit, just because he's his brother.
I might be Goodwill Hunting, but Ben, you're good. You're a bad will cunting. Bad Ben Gunting. All right, man. Okay. Victim into the drink.
As he actually makes the mistake the first time for his bad will cunting, and like Ben's like, your will, right? Like your will.
J-Lo,
have you watched the
J-Lo's
movie?
like, this is why I said beer, wine, and spirits only.
Right. Oh, yeah.
All right. So, Will, this is part of the Forgotten Project where initially what we did is we asked people to write in and suggest topics that we had started but not finished, or topics we promised we'd talk about we never got to, which we're still open to that. So if you're listening to this and you want to submit something for us to talk about for upcoming episodes of the Forgotten Project, you can. But what it also did was send me back into the mailbag, our dense mailbag, to sort through some emails because I had forgotten, but I started up a folder in our email called a rabbit hole. So named because I was like, this is good content, but it goes deep and there's no way we can just cover this at the end of a regular episode. And I'd forgotten about this bag altogether. So I've dug out a few choice letters from here, and these are dating from the last 2 years, just some highlights. Now, I want to start with one because I need to open with an apology. This came from Travis, and I'm just going to read you the email. It's going to become clear what's happened.
Dear Will and Charlie, why does it always rain on me?
Nice. I love a mohawk semi-folk rock band. Travis says, hope this finds you well. Apologies for not getting in touch sooner. Crazy times. This was sent in 2020, May 2020. So it was the craziest of times. It was the crazier of times.
Well, he starts with an apology for not getting in touch sooner, which makes me feel less bad about the fact that we haven't been back in touch.
Yeah. Now, what has happened is he said last time we spoke was via Instagram. So he's obviously reached out via Instagram, and I tend to operate the Instagram account. So this is contact here with me. And I was telling you about my podcast with the hope of getting you and Will to come on an episode. Okay. I understand that during these times it can be difficult to get you both on. So attached is a brief outline of how the episode would flow. This is only a rough outline, and as you would be aware, things can get off track easily. But let me break things down for you a bit more.
Okay.
My podcast is called Breaking Down, in brackets, the Pod. It's a new podcast to take a look at existing podcasts. It's a behind-the-mic look at not only some of my favourite podcasts, but other popular and not so popular Australian podcasts, to give existing listeners an insight on how it all comes together without giving away too many secrets, of course. Also, to give listeners out there in podcast land the opportunity to find new podcasts that they may not have come across yet. It's designed to be smart and informative while also being fun and a bit of entertainment in the world.
So here's what I would say firstly, just based on this. That's a good idea. I would absolutely listen to that podcast if I knew about it, if I was aware of it.
Breaking Down the Pod. So given we are in lockdown, I'm doing these via Zoom.
Zoom. Remember that?
Guys? Adorable. Podcast via Zoom. Once we're able to lock in a date and time, I'll send you a meeting link before we record. We can have a bit of chat to get the flow going. Obviously knows us well, knows that we have to talk to Podcast Mike to warm up. So once the episode is up, I'll push it out to my socials. My aim is to get 3 more records, yours being one of them, before uploading the first 6 episodes, blah, 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 blah. So Travis has attached an outline for the show. Now, clearly, whatever happened, we forgot to get in touch. Travis, I apologize. Like, I don't know what was going – well, I know what was going on in the middle of 2020, so that probably explains why I didn't get back to you straight away. But I do apologize. I'm sure that Will and I probably had intentions of doing it, and then for whatever reason, we just got sidetracked. But what I thought we'd do as a little to make up for it is that he sent in the questions that he wanted to ask us on Breaking Down the Pod. So it's not perfect, But I thought what we could do, Travis, is answer your questions on this episode of TOFOP. And then, look, I don't know if your podcast is still up and running or, if you'd like to have us on again at some date or one of us on at some date, I'm sure we can arrange it. But consider this a mulligan / do-over for us not responding to your very first email 2 years ago. And by the way, he's breaking down the pod. Excellent artwork. It's a kind of satire, a spoof of the Breaking Bad with like the green and all the element letters and stuff. Breaking down the pod. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Tell us who you are, a brief outline of your podcast, and throw in your socials. Okay. Hi, I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
We do a podcast called TOFOP. We do many podcasts, but this one in particular is called TOFOP. It's really a comedy conversation between two old mates. We tend to talk about, personal anecdotes, little bits of news items. There are some recurring themes that have happened over the years. The most famous probably being the Bin trilogy, in which I was obsessed with what was happening with my bins. More recently, we've talked about the boy band Five, and even more recently, Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, we thought it was cool things for cool people, but we've realised we're just here for each other's bullshit.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing for everyone. Okay, so these are some generic questions. So we can alternate, I guess, or we can team up on these.
Okay.
Where did your podcast journey begin?
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Where did our podcast journey begin?
I think Smodcast. I think that was the first podcast I started listening to regularly. And I think I don't know if we recommended it to each other or we found it independent of each other, but I do distinctly remember you were doing some trial shows of stand-up and I was being paid to document it. I was riding along with you and shooting the shows and some behind-the-scenes stuff. And so we had a lot of time to kill and we would listen to podcasts in the car. And I remember that was the first kind of seed of, we could do this, because Smodcast essentially was Kevin Smith and his mate and producer Scott Mosier just bullshitting, telling personal anecdotes, funny news items, occasionally some recurring themes. So that is, I think, where it began. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I remember really liking podcasts a lot as soon as I was aware of them. I did have faith that the way that they are now, where everybody knows about podcasts and what a podcast is and how to get a podcast and everybody has a fucking podcast. I suspected this was always going to happen because it felt compelling to me. It felt to me like, wouldn't it be good if radio was interesting and wasn't full with all the bullshit the radio was filled with? But then also there was just something about, I know that there's that real meme that people are like, oh, everyone's got a podcast now. Oh, you got a podcast, have you? Yeah, cool. That's fine, I think. I think that's a really good thing. Everyone can play guitar and some people are just going to play it by themselves at home and some people are going to, become a professional guitarist. I think it's cool that everybody has access to be able to do that, to make a thing of their own. So I always thought it was cool. I thought if we got in early, we might capitalize on when it grew, that we might be pushed to the top. That did not happen. We stayed about where we were the entire way through. We got there's no real value. This is what I will tell you. There's no real value in us being the original prospectors. I mean, of course we weren't. There were already people mining for gold in their hills but we were
not
around
many.
Towards the start.
The
right?
only other Australian ones I can remember, I remember Lawrence Lung was doing one. That was actually when I first became aware that, we could possibly do this. Is I think Lawrence, it was either an article written about him or he posted it on socials. It was him, I think, with Andrew McClellan sitting at a table with microphones. I'm like, oh, fuck, they're not even in a studio. That's just someone's kitchen or something like that. And then Josh Thomas, he had one. With
Josh Thomas and has a friend or something.
And friend.
Yeah.
So I remember his friend, who's a comic as well, I think, or a writer, Tom Walker, is that his name?
That's right.
Yeah.
Tom Ward.
Tom Ward, sorry, apologies. I remember because we let your management token know that we were going to be doing a podcast and someone said, we can put you in touch with Josh and Tom if you want some advice. And I remember sending Tom an email with, hey, man, we're thinking of doing it. And He didn't seem that interested.
He was like, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
You fuck off.
I think he had better things to do than help us start a rival podcast for some reason. Okay, so next question. What was the inspiration for the initial idea and the subject matter of the podcast? I think that
what I will say is I often say that we are from the time. This is how the difference between our show and other shows is podcasts didn't need to be about anything. It was the fact that you had one. That was enough. And people would like all these disparate podcasts because they were kind of into podcasts. You'd find this audience of people who are going, oh, I'll listen to this podcast about science, or I'll listen to this podcast about something else, because what I actually like is podcasts. And I remember those early days of the LA Podcast Festival and things like that, where you're just like, this is a community of people who are combined because they like these shows, but also because they genuinely have discovered this new form of entertainment that they were original fans of something that has now grown into a global phenomenon, one of the most powerful mediums in the entire world. But they were in on the ground level. They recognized that it was a cool thing before everybody else. But we didn't think that your show had to be about something. We just thought it was enough that we had a show.
But I think in terms of the inspiration, so clearly Smodcast, so I'd say there was some stuff, definitely in the early days we tried to ape or recreate or do our take on, definitely the hypotheticals, that was a Smodcast thing, is they would just come up and, Kevin Smith is and they had a really good balance where Kevin is very verbose and, can take a story anywhere. And then you got a really dry, funny Scott Mosier just kind of playing the Spock to his Captain Kirk almost. So I think we sort of tried hard with that stuff at first. And we did a bit of role playing, because that's a big thing that they did on Smodcast, where they would say, isn't this a funny story? Oh, so imagine you're the guy. How would that go? So I think we tried that initially and then quickly realized it's not our forte. We just sort of backed away. And I'd say
and definitely the dirty talk,
humor,
edginess of it,
edgelord humor.
Because it was this new thing that felt a bit secret, it also felt a bit like that was what it was. It was the stuff that was too edgy to be on the radio. I remember that Limo and I had a podcast when we were doing the radio show together that was an up late, after dark sort of version. And it was dirty jokes, because that kind of felt like what podcasting is. And I know,
that was a brief thing, wasn't it? Where all the commercial radio shows released their pods, where it was you can say, fuck guys, go for it. And so it's just all that, that's all it was.
Right. So I think that was definitely and we used to get drunk early as well. We would drink a lot.
Slurring. I think you would bring a 6-pack over was that. Yeah, it was, there would be some messy episodes in the start of it. And then I think, I can't remember, I don't think there was a clear delineation point. It wasn't we just sort of decided we weren't going to do that. It just evolved roundabout, I think, where Semi Cav got involved. So maybe 6 years into it or something like that.
When we had someone more professional that we had to talk to occasionally, who would judge us on what we were doing. Yeah, I guess it did.
Well, that's when we started getting things that's when we got to produce someone to produce the show. Obviously it was Mike Howell before it was Podcast Mike. But then, the idea of getting Foz to do original artwork, I think it just sort of became, we decided we wanted a bit more of an identity.
We were maybe if we try at this, it might become more successful. Again, I need to point out for anyone listening for advice, it did not.
It didn't. Narrator voice, it didn't.
It did not.
I think one of the things we worked out, and this is something we discussed in the last 12 months, where I was sort of saying have we shot ourselves in the foot by not being formatted? We make it harder for ourselves. And then you made the quite salient point, if it was formatted, we probably wouldn't be able to do it. If it required any more prep than it already has, then we probably wouldn't be able to do it. I think that is the secret to the success. Will is right. We haven't become super successful. Maybe if we had sort of worked and honed a formula that was, marketable and commercial and stuff, we could have pushed this to the moon and back.
Anyone who gives you, I've worked in those areas where they would just say, hey, this area is working really well for you, whether it be like superhero chat or like whatever it would be. Just lean into that, lean into that world, create that market. But we're a show where if you tune in for like 3-4 weeks in a row, you're like, oh, I love pop culture. They're talking about Top Gun. This is fun. And then if you tune in for the next 4 weeks, we're talking about fucking bins. Like there is, there's no consistency to like what the tone or attitude or like subject matter of the content will be. And I love that. Like I think it's the reason we still do it. And the is A, that it is easy to do. B, I honestly think it is. What would we do that would be unique? This is unique, like because of the way that it came about and the sort of show it is. There is no, I mean, there may be other shows like TOFOP, but I certainly wouldn't listen to them. It's a fucking rabble. But I think that like we just like you've got your Till We Die t-shirt on. Like this is the formula that means that we can keep doing this. If we want to just keep doing this for as long as we want to do it, this is the formula.
I often think of that scene in the second series of Extras where Ricky Gervais's character has gotten so famous with his sitcom character that he quits because he wants to be taken seriously. But then once he shuts down the sitcom, like he can't get any work and the only job offers he's getting is like Celebrity Big Brother or whatever. And he's talking to his agent. And his agent's like, well, mate, I don't understand what you want. Do you want to be rich and famous or do you want to be an artist? And he's like, I want to be both. And the agent's like, there's very few people who do exactly what they want and are also rich and successful from doing that. Yeah. So what does it want to be? And it's like, I think that's kind of like this show is so specific to us and unique to us. It would be extraordinary if there was a huge audience for it because it
always has been. We haven't we have a name that makes no sense. Like the branding of it is all over the shop. Like it's so in-jokey. Like, I mean, literally we've featured listeners of the podcast in our episode art. Like it's in-jokey. It's for the people who like it and it's incomprehensible to anybody else. But welcome to any new listeners. If this is your first episode, I appreciate you tuning in.
Start at new episodes, work your way back, stop when you get uncomfortable. Okay, so what was the most complicated and the least complicated part about starting this show?
Most complicated was absolutely technology.
Schedules?
Well, no, I think in the early days, schedules was okay.
Not get that nailed for 30 eps.
Yeah, technology. Like, I mean, it was harder back then. Like, there wasn't the ubiquity of technology and it was more complicated and neither of us had any skill in that area. So technology was the biggest challenge. Scheduling was okay early on. It got more complicated as obviously we got busier and our lives went in different directions and different places. But again, technology caught up a bit, which has meant that, I mean, we barely ever record I think at the start you wouldn't have even imagined that we wouldn't record it in the same room. Whereas like now we've probably done more episodes with us not in the same room as we have with us in the same room.
Yeah. It felt like because I think you moved to the States pretty soon after us starting, right? Like 2012 or something like that. So
riding that podcasting wave washed me all the way to the USA. They were just ready for podcasting.
And the least complicated about starting the podcast journey was having something to talk about. I guess, I mean, after almost 400 episodes, that doesn't seem to be a weakness at all. No.
I mean, there's always plenty to talk about, particularly if you're willing to explore something in such intricate detail as we are. That's my favorite thing. I don't even care what we're talking about. I just love exploring an idea or a concept or a thing that happened, like to pick it apart. That's all I really like. And like, that's why my favorite episodes are always when you just come in with like, I don't really have much, but I've got like this half story. And then like 45 minutes later, we're at the end of your story. And I'm just like, I just like asking annoying questions. I think I'm like, my inner child is a literal child that's just like, but why? But what did you do then? What if this had happened?
But why? Not a cliche, by the way. Iona's in a real but why stage.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, the but why gets to a point where the question does not justify a why answer.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what was there one the other day? It was like, why do horses have tails? And I said, I think it's to, keep flies off them. But why? Because the flies can irritate them. But why? Oh, because they get down to their skin. But why? Because the flies want to feed off the sweat of the horse. But why? Because they need to stay hydrated. But why? Because they need fluid. But why? Because that's the physiology of a fly. But why? Because they were evolved from whatever they were. But why? Because life has a way of moving forward. But why? Because if we don't, then there is no purpose to anything. Like it just snowballs until it's like that. I don't think that's a why question.
I mean, they all seem like why questions.
It sounds like you and Iona, inquiring minds. Okay, what are some of your favorite podcasts to listen to? I feel we've discussed this quite a bit on the show. If in a similar vein, a show that I love that I couldn't possibly recommend to anyone is Tell 'em Steve Dave, which was initially a spin-off of Smodcast. It was a couple of mates of Kevin Smith's that do this podcast out of New Jersey. And one of the guys has gone on to be a cast member of the Impractical Jokers. So he's probably the most famous out of the three of them. And he was originally just like the guy who did their panel. But it's been running almost as long as TOFOP, and it is a very similar dynamic. And it's really just a comedy conversation between three old mates. But like, I'm too invested now. It's kind of like you in Smallville. It's like I occasionally I'll have phases where I don't listen to it, but then I will normally just like binge on a whole bunch of episodes. But that's my comfort food. That's what I imagine TOFOP is for a lot of people, which is like you can just put it on and it's just a nice, comfortable podcast where you know the tone and the banter and the pace of it all. So you can even tune out and you can still stay in the conversation because you know it so well.
My version of that in Australia is definitely anything that Cam and Alexi do. So all their Total Reboot stuff, but any of their podcasts, like the obviously, you know, the couple of documentary series that they made as well are very great podcasts, Finding Drago and Finding why is that name escaping me? What's the Desperado? Finding Desperado. So I like all their things. There's two that I always mention, but they're like Tell 'em Steve Dave is for you, which is Are You Dude, the American podcast, and Never Not Funny. And both of those podcasts have been around longer than we've been around. And I wonder if that's like part of it. I'm like, yeah, I show some old school respect to the people who were there even before we were there. I'm like, I'm still listening to your podcast. And they're both podcasts that are a bit like us. You know, we saw everybody else take off and just stayed about the same, but are still doing it. And I think it's the reason that I like those shows a lot is they're just still doing what they always did. And I still love it as much as I always did.
Yeah, well, there's one thing about Steve Dave that I love as well is they like subsist entirely off their patrons, but they have now they now serve their patrons. Like that's an actual business where they just pump content into their Patreon. And it's like they're making videos, they're taking requests for special things. And it's like, and these are like five guys who aren't media performers or in the industry or whatever. It's kind of like a hobby, I guess, but it's a hobby that they can draw another income from. And I'm like, I like this democratization of entertainment. You know, the things that I support on Patreon, I like the idea that I can give my money. You know, I know there's Patreon's taking a little bit of a dip in wetting their beak a little, taking a little bit of a taste, just a little bit of a taste. But I do like the idea that they didn't have to go to some distributor and, you know, get put on certain channels to get heard. Like you can just find them. And that is what I really dig about it. Obviously,
that's what I like about. I think these other two shows as well, and Dum Dum is a good example of this, where it's almost their major thing, if that makes sense. Like the joy of Are You Dude, the joy of Never Not Funny, even though Jimmy Pardo's a very successful comedian, all those sort of things as well. Like that show is almost the center of their life, and you know, and it's a bit the same with Dum Dum. I love those shows where, like you said, they have time to not just attract a community, but to curate that community and produce content that community. Like I dig this show because I joined up to I'd listened to so much Never Not Funny that I eventually ran out of all the free episodes that they have on iTunes. And I was like, you know what? I should do the right thing. I just need to like sign up and support them. And then on Patreon, they have their own version of Patreon that like you can just sign up on their website, their own business model. And so I signed up and I've unlocked all the back episodes, but I just have to work out how I can get them on my phone and not just listen to them on my computer. I'm sure there's a way I could do that. I just haven't worked it out yet. But they have video of every episode. And then I was suddenly like, you know what? I actually would like to see how this show looks when they're recording it. They're all in the same studio. And then I was like, oh, we've got this and we've got that. And I was like, this is like, I do enjoy, like, I trust this group of entertainers more than I trust the idea of Hollywood. Like Hollywood is making,
100%.
or whatever, right? But I know these guys and I know their sense of humor and I know their world and I enjoy it. And if they've got like Never Not Funny, for example, they do their regular episode, but then they do like a platinum episode every week, which is another full episode, but they literally just like, they play games, like they just have some fun. Like it's not, but it's great. Like I love it because I already love them and I love their show.
I always say with the Weekly Planet, like one of the most interesting things that I thought they did was when they started taking on like sponsorship was to include us in the process of who they were going to take money from and why. And they were very transparent about, Meso was like, look, I have another job, so it's fine. Like, I'm not going to guilt you into thinking like you guys need to give us all your money. Whatever, what was their line? Like whatever, if you wouldn't notice if it was missing from your pocket, then that's how much you should give. That's what we want. And then the idea of, well, these are the advertisers we're going to take on. We're not going to take gambling money. We're not going to take, alcohol money or whatever. And that level of kind of transparency and authenticity, like, made me go, I want to support these companies because if you support them, guys, I trust your voice. I want to support you. And so I think that that was before we even knew who those guys were. I was like, these are dudes with integrity. I love the way they're not like, they haven't seen this as like we're making our radio show, we'll get picked up by Austereo and, or it was like, no, we are genuinely doing this for a community of people. And it turns out that when you are like talented and you curate to a certain community, it can work really well.
Oh, but I mean, that's what I ran into Meso recently. It was so nice to see him.
On
He's
the
such
latest episode of
He's such a
he said you're wearing a mask and he was staring at you and he was like, am I just staring at a really tall guy or is that Will Anderson?
I was like, do I have a very distinctive gait? Which I do, of course. But I was like, I was still well spotted. It was the day I was recording my special of Willogical. So I was a bit distracted, one of those days when you're like, your head's in another space, but it's always nice to see him and he's such a funny guy and I love that show. But again, that's a good example of, I think they've done well at that being their community because like for him, he's a guy who's like driving trams and then making this like really cool like piece of entertainment that like has like huge amounts of like listeners and, people who just absolutely first thing that they listen to every week. And I think, there's something to be said about that.
James told me this story a while back. We're both obsessed with, do you know who Steven Crowder is? He's this right-wing YouTuber. He's just like massive, like loudmouth dude, failed actor and stand-up comedian turned right-wing pundit. And
by the way, that is a career path that I didn't know 5 years ago was open to you. But like failed comedian into right wing pundit, it seams to be quite a lucrative way to go.
It's functioning will take you in a heartbeat. So we often like send each other little funny videos, and if Steven Crowder's done something dumb, we'll let each other know. And he said that Steven Crowder invited him because James is a very prominent YouTuber, and especially in that sort of geek world. And when Wonder Woman came out, like Steven Crowder invited James to go on his show, I guess as a kind of setup, like, you're from the nerd world, do nerds think that women could actually win in a hand-to-hand fight with a man? Like, I assume that would have been like the angle. And he said, nah, but I didn't do it. And I was like, oh mate, like you should I'd love to see like Mr. Sunday Movies go head to head with Steven Crowder. I reckon James would towel him up. He's 10 times funnier and knows his shit a lot better. It
is interesting. I occasionally get invited on like the UK equivalent of one of those shows. So there's obviously someone I imagine I reckon they've got an Australian producer or something like that. So when there's some hot topic in the world of comedy or something like that, and this person wants to like debate that cancel culture's gone too far or whatever, I get like a request to come on his show and like, but that's honestly, it's always that request and you always know what the agenda is that they'll just invite you on and that is your role on that. But I find the other one more interesting. Like, how about this as a narrative comedy, idea? Like, I mean, I don't think anyone's making these sort of shows anymore, but like, so say if I got sacked from the ABC. Let's just say I get sacked from the ABC for whatever reason, right? There's some sort of scandal, I get cancelled, right? Do you think that I could just blatantly make the pivot. Like, I'm not saying that I would ever morally be able to do this, but I just mean in a sense, could I sell the story? Because here's what, like, I know that people's initial thing would be like, nah, it's too big of a turn. No one's going to believe it. But I actually think you can make an absolutely wild turn.
Absolutely.
In fact, the extremes are kind of the best place to go, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if I just went out and like just started running this agenda against the ABC, like if that's like all my bitterness was about, like
Sky News
in a second, right?
Sky News,
one of them has come over to us, to like bag them. Like I'd be their best weapon, right?
Every panel show, you would be the token lefty, the weak-kneed lefty that they could get on and bash and harangue, and they would love that. You'd be like Reek from Game of Thrones. They're removing your balls and your penis. And you'd just be...
I was thinking I was making a bit more of a pivot into their world, but you're saying they're using me as some sort of left-wing gimp. Is that what you're saying?
I think either way, like there's so many grifters on the right who are like, like, do you know who Tim Pool is? Like Tim Pool is always like, I'm a liberal, I'm a left-leaning, I used to vote Democrat. And it's like, but you are, everything you say is right wing, or your followers are right wing. Like but it's a good way of proving how flawed, the left kind of philosophy is, or left ideals are. It's like, see, even he couldn't stomach it. Now he just wants white supremacists following him.
Right. But that is a pivot that is lucrative these days. And like, I mean,
100%.
You look
Dave
at,
Rubin.
Well, even in Australian context, like you look at the careers that like people like Joe Hildebrand or like Rowan Dean or Paul Murray have been able to carve out. Like,
were they pivots? Did they all start off on the left, those guys?
I mean, I think Joe Hildebrand considers himself to be of the left still, which is ridiculous considering the things that he says and does. But like, it's also, Paul Murray was definitely left and consciously went right. Yeah. Like he absolutely did it on purpose. I knew Paul Murray before he was Paul Murray, and Paul Murray absolutely 100% set his eyes on like doing exactly what we're talking about and trying to capture that market. Rowan Dean, I don't know. He was probably always a bit of a dickhead, but like the low bar for comedy on that side, like what they embrace because they finally have their own comedy. Like, can you imagine like if you actually had any skills? Because it's easy enough. I could make jokes about, like, it would be easy enough for me to make jokes about the people they want me to make jokes about, because with my left-wing principles, many of the sort of middle left people frustrate the shit out of me all the time. I would find it easy to, like, write jokes about centrist politics. You just have to tweak them a little to sound like they're coming from their side of the agenda.
I think I've heard you. I mean, you don't not make fun of the ABC. It would just be a case of just cranking that up by like, a few, like 10, 20%. Like, it doesn't take much. Then, I mean, easily. I mean, I think you wouldn't have a credibility issue, and B, you'd be embraced. They would love that, especially because you're like the reason, rusted on.
Well, the reason that I got sacked. Yeah, because I'm a white straight man,
and white male.
There's just no room for a straight white male in Australia anymore. What happened to the larrikin? Yeah. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start their own podcast journey? All right. Let's give them 3 key points. Regularity, I would say, is the number one thing. Like,
that doesn't have to be every week. Like, you could do seasons.
But
in fact, maybe don't even commit yourself to the fact that you're going to do a year every year. I think if we were starting over and we had some model where it was like, so Never Not Funny do seasons. So they probably do 40 episodes in a year. And I think that makes a lot more sense. We're kind of like have some holidays and stuff now. So, but regularity is good, but it doesn't have to be every week or every day.
I think coming up with a format, I know that's not us, but I think like we do 2 Guys, 1 Cup, and that has a format, and it's really easy to prep for that show because I know, okay, well, we need 10 minutes of this, we need, 15 minutes of that, and then we finish with like letters. And I think, Weekly Planet's another great example. They structure the show, and if you have a framework, you're not going to be umming and ahhing, and there's nothing like you don't want it to, it's a balancing act. You don't want it to be like commercial radio where you're getting punched in and but just know where you're going, and so that, even if your audience is getting bored, they can skip to the next section, which they like.
But just do something that you'll find fun to do. Like, the last thing in the world you want it to be is a chore. If you feel like it's a real pain. I mean, like, as fun as this is, of course, sometimes it doesn't suit both of our schedules, or we have to, jam it in. It can be inconvenient. But once we start doing it, it's never not fun, right? Like, we like.
Maybe we should start a podcast. We should change the name to Never Not Fun.
It's completely different.
Speaking of pivots,
it's a completely different podcast.
Okay, these are some specific questions related to all thing TOFOP. How did you and Will join forces to create the TOFOP brand? We're just mates. That's how it happened. We're mates to begin with. Do you have a favorite podcast you do? So I'm assuming out of the TOFOP network. A favorite? I think at the moment, I think this year I've really loved doing Two Guys, One Cup. I think with the
it has been fun. It's been a fun year of it. It's been a great year of like the actual sport itself that we talk about, which has helped a little bit. Yeah. But I've really enjoyed doing that show this year.
Yeah. What is the funniest or the craziest moment you can remember from doing a podcast? I think the shaver, me finding out on air that the shaver I'd ordered for, I know people love that, and I can even though I am humiliated in that clip, I have seen it and thought that it's pretty funny. Like, it's a pretty funny moment. I think going to LA, Opera House was pretty crazy. The fact that we got to do this, in a hallowed venue like the Opera House, that was pretty crazy. And sold out 2 nights. That was pretty crazy.
They're all good examples. Like, I've found like going to the LA Podcast Festival. The fact that we were doing this show on stage, like in America, like in front of a full crowd of people who come to see it. Like, it was that. I always think that was the wildest moment where you're like, we're not from here. Like, it felt like we were like the Hoodoo Gurus or something, like doing a little tour of America. Radio. Like, exactly. That's what it felt like. It felt like a real college radio moment.
I do remember, it's not really a TOFOP moment, but when I was doing the telethon one year and John Deeks is emceeing, and so it was like 500 people in the audience and stuff, and I was coming out to do my panel. And before I sat down, Deeks is, bringing out all the celebs who are going to be sitting down, and he's like, and it's Charlie Clausen. And then he turns to the crowd and he's like, who here's a fan of TOFOP? And not one person put their hand up, and I'm like, that's a secret. No one really knows about TOFOP. Don't bother. Okay. Quite often you and Will are in different locations, sometimes different countries. How was this process? I think it was trickier at the start, but we've been doing it so long now, I can't even really remember. How do we do it? We just record remotely. Remotely on our own Zooms, and then
on Skype.
And did one of us cut it?
So we'd Skype, and then
we just weren't doing it,
and then we just edit them together.
I can't remember.
Maybe.
You guys have one of the best followings on social media that I have seen from a podcast. Are you able to fill us in on how the Tea Room came about and what it's meant in relation to how you do the podcast and the multiple giveaways? We can't really speak to that because we have nothing to do with the Tea Room. I believe it was started by JD Denham, who's a regular listener, often writes in. He's an administrator there at least. 2,000 or so members, which is pretty great. Will doesn't visit it at all, I don't believe, do you? You've never seen it?
I do not.
I've dipped in from time to time.
I'd forgotten of its existence. Yeah, because every time you dip in, you tell me about something and I'm like, that is not a place for me.
It's
that one thing that you've told me. It's generally good, but not always.
It's generally very good, except when you choose to switch podcasting platforms in a desperate attempt to make money for your flailing AFL-adjacent podcast. That was an unpopular decision. No, but I would say it is 99% very positive. Because people it's not all about the episodes. People will just they'll chat with each other. It's like a community. It's where people will go to post things. I did make a rare appearance on the Tea Room a couple of weeks ago to say, hey, we're doing this thing called the Forgotten Project. hit us up with anything you want us to talk about. And not one person responded. So I feel like
so the tea room's not particularly active at the tea room at the moment.
Well,
is that what
I
you're
think
saying?
it's the fact is that we have made it clear that we will not frequent the tea room, and so me sort of busting in like, hey,
the fact that you were there, you're suddenly
I'm
like,
like
hey,
absentee
you
father.
cool?
It's like, hey guys, it's me, your dad. Now I need to borrow $20. What do you got? You got something for your old dad? Come on, give me $20. It's like fuck, man, you weren't around. Where were you when we needed you?
Oh, man.
No, so it was.
I'm going to start Deadbeat Dad Pod. That's going to be my new offering in the market.
And how does it affect the way we do the podcast? There has been occasions where we've grabbed stuff from the tea room. Like one of the listeners, I can't remember who, so I apologize. When we came up with the We Keep Them Laughing So They Keep You Living, she said, this is my occupation. Yep. This is what's yours. And we got a lot of content out of that.
Yes.
And there's been different times where, I've grabbed stuff from there. The part that baffles me in this question is how does it relate to your podcast and your multiple giveaways? Is that like the posters and the fridge magnets and stuff?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, and back then we might have been giving away something else as well. I mean, this is a couple of years ago. You got to remember. I don't know what else we were giving away.
Yeah,
but
in the words of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, we're giving it away now.
Give it away now.
So now all the giveaways that happen are I'll send fridge magnets. It goes just to Patreon. If you're a Patreon and you write into us, you supply your address, you get a fridge magnet if you live in Australia. If you subscribe at the $20 or more level, I'll send you an autographed poster. And we're running low on those. We're going to think of a new prize soon. So just think about that. One of my favorite things from TOFOP was the Fax Machine Debacle. Fill your listeners in on how that came about and what the consequences were of your action. Well, funnily enough, we touched on this last episode. I don't think we talked about the origins of it, but it came about where we talked about how anachronistic our show can be. And wouldn't it be funny if we got a fax line, 20 years after fax machines were relevant? And initially we were going to get our own fax machine, but I investigated it was too hard to do. So instead, I made a deal with my local news agent.
With the devil. I made a deal with Satan himself.
Oh, my God. I think I was going to pay her like $20 or something a week to receive our faxes. And then she was fucking bombed. She was phone bombed for a 48-hour period.
What a moment in that poor person's life where she's just agreed to something that you've just got to think she did not understand in the first place. And then that to happen. Like, I mean, I bet that is a story she tells for the rest of her life. When people are asking what's one of the weirdest things that happened while you ran a news agency, she's like, well, I got a story for you. Firstly, have you watched Blue Heelers or Home and Away? Because this actor from the telly comes in, says he's got like an imaginary radio show or something, and they want a fax line, but he can't work out a fax line. So can I rent your fax line? And then the machine went. Anyway, this is why Dave left in the end. Like it was this was the final straw.
I mean, it really was a fucking high watermark for our show. But I guess we completely underestimated how popular that segment was going to be, and B, how many other people have access to fax machines. Like I thought we'd get like 5 at most. I didn't think we'd get
that's right. We thought the amount of correspondence we got would be limited by other people's capacity to send a fax. But it turns out you can also send a fax from your computer. Yeah. You don't need a fax machine to send a fax.
So we essentially doxed this poor lady, and now the newsagent has shut down. Okay, a couple questions to go. You guys are getting close to the big, and he says 300th episode. Simpler times. Well, we're getting close to our 400th.
Couple episodes, 400th. Yeah,
what are the plans for that? Sadly, nothing really.
To pre-record it, to bulk pre-record it and roll out that episode, I believe, based on the timeline that we have.
Will and I, like most middle-aged couples, and we've gotten over celebrating anniversaries. The best it's a fucking hand job.
That's another day, isn't it?
Nothing
another
special.
episode.
I mean, we should do something. We should do something at some point.
We want to go back. We have not done a live show now for a very, very long time, and the live shows were always great fun, and we would love to be able to do one again at some stage in the future.
Given we are in the corona world, or I'll just say post-corona world, has this impacted the way...
No, we're not. Come on, Charlie. Don't believe the narrative. We are still in the corona world.
Corona world. How has this impacted the way you guys do the podcast? Not at all. We were ahead of the curve. This is how we're doing it pre-corona. This is how we're going to do it during corona. Nothing has changed for us at all. If anything, we probably put a bit more work into the pods in the last couple of years because every other bit of work dried up for a bit there.
Yeah, there was a period of time where it was like not just important in the sense of like important to us to have something creatively to do, but also just important to be able to have those when everything was locked down and there wasn't a lot of like human interaction, like being able to have those conversations regularly was pretty healthy.
We'll get into Wilson type areas. All right. Yeah. There you go, Travis. I hope your podcast is doing well and you can use that. If you want to clip that up and use it in your podcast, you're more than welcome to do that. This is part of the Forgotten Project. Again, if there's stuff you want us to talk about that we promised we would but we didn't, or you sent something in and somehow we missed it like Travis here, let us know. You can go to tofop.com and just contact us. There's a drop-down menu. Just select TOFOP, send us an email or DM us at TOFOP, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't forget, you can go to our Patreon, get into all our great bonus content. There's bonus episodes there, artwork, comic strips, lots of great stuff to check out. And Will has a TV show.
Oh, it's Cool Question Everything. It's on the ABC 8:30 on Wednesday nights, or you can catch it on ABC iView.
So that is TOFOP for another week. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.
This podcast is a TOFOP production.
Head to tofop.com for more.
Cool things for cool people.